Okay, so welcome to another video, just doing a sort of monthly update on various things that I got painted. I've been home a bit more, although I did have a very rapid trip to Germany and the Czech Republic via Austria as part of my monthly movements, but I've been home for about a week now, and I've managed to finish up some stuff that's been in progress for a while. So, we'll start by looking at some late Roman archers. These figures were originally, I started painting them probably in 2002, maybe 2003. So they've been kind of in progress for a very long time. I finally finished them off. You can see I've gone for a yellow and red design with these guys. And I've based them up on just 2 per base on the sort of DBX style. This way they function as skirmishers, and then if I want to, I could just stick them on the back of a spear unit or whatever, and they can then become like an embedded archer element that travels with the unit. But I wanted to do them as kind of more skirmishy archer types for a late Roman, early Byzantine sort of Justinian era army that I've bought many years ago from Foundry. These are Foundry figures, excellent peri sculpts. You'll notice that the skin tones vary severely across them. The guy with the blonde hair, I think I should have done a little bit more of a highlight on him. It's quite shallow highlights, but I think I was trying to go for a more subtle look rather than the usual very deep dark recesses that I have on the other figures, but it is what it is. Figures are fine, the basing looks good. I think the basing ties them together. You know, it's all, a lot of the times figures look kind of half done until you base them. But anyway, so yep, these are done, and they go into the nascent army. There's no like grand scheme here. I just, as I've said before, what I do is I look at the racking or the shelving that I have at the kind of half completed things, and I pick stuff up and just work on it as the fancy takes me. And so I felt compelled to get these done, since they were largely complete, as I say, and I quite like the sort of Justinian era uniform. I love the sort of tunic with that sort of like sewn on patches and the shoulder sections. It looks really cool. So next is something you've probably seen from the channel before as in progress. These are the Pecheneg horse archers, or Pecheneg. I am calling these done. There's still highlights to be done on the horses, and I really hate painting horses. I need to find a method that's like quick and easy and doesn't require huge amounts of work. But you can see like at the base of the hooves there's these are first core figures. They're actually quite nice. I mean, I don't think I've necessarily, again, you're seeing these really close. You're not going to be staring at them at this range, so I think the range doesn't help. But I've gone for a sort of sheen look on their kaftans, and then I've tried to add splashes of color to sort of indicate that rich sort of nomadic horseman, sort of thing, which is like people who essentially live off loot, basically. The horses are probably the bit that lets it down the most in my mind. I really hate painting horses. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know that. So I need to do some tidy up there. And if you look at their back hooves, you'll see there's like molded grass that kind of grounds the figure, and I need to go back and paint that. I don't generally like that as a thing, because it doesn't blend in with the grass tufts and stuff on the base. But it's obviously important because it anchors the figure. If you remove that and then you've just got the figure essentially grounded on the 2 hooves, then you're in for a treat, because this is quite soft metal, especially like the hooves of a horse, where the leg is quite narrow, so it naturally forms like a fulcrum, I guess, is that the word, or like a hinge, because it's weak relative to the weight of the figure above it. So I'm not going to take a chance on that. I've done it before in the past. With plastic figures it's less of an issue, because plastic is like way more rigid, right? But again, you have the problem of like you're looking at single points of break. It's a lot easier to get some leverage on that breakage point than if you have it anchored at multiple points. So I will stick with the figures as they are. As I said, I probably need to do a little bit of highlighting on like on the tails and the manes, and on the horseflesh itself. But I just can't stand to work on these anymore, honestly. I think if I do more and then I have the opportunity to kind of go back and do some tidy up, I might do that, as I finish more bases. Not a big deal. All right, next up is a very large quantity. I say large quantity, it's actually a large quantity of bases of French chasseurs for the Franco-Prussian War. These are Pendraken figures in 10mm, and they were painted over I'd say like a several month period. So there's actually two generations, if you will, of painting in here. There's a slightly older generation, and then the ones that I finished this last weekend. I think I prefer the newer style that I've gone for. So the minor differences with the tone of blue, it's a bit darker for the newer ones, which I think is more in keeping with the chasseur uniform. The other thing that's different is like the way that the tent poles were done between the two generations, and the rucksacks, knapsacks look a little bit different. But other than that, they're largely the same. I think I did the skin tones differently as well. On the newer ones, I just used the contrast paint from Games Workshop, and that actually worked out really well. Again, this is one of those tips and tricks that I picked up from Kevin Krause of the Krause collection. He's an expert on painting small scale figures, and so I defer to his expertise when it comes to these things. They're not designed to be stared at up close. Another thing you may notice is, so with my Franco-Prussian War collection, the packs from Pendraken come in the unit packs, come with packs of 30. So, but it depends what you buy. So if you get the line, they come in, you get 30 line figures, and then you have to buy the commands separately. With the chasseur, it's slightly different. You get 30 figures, which includes a trumpeter, or bugler, I guess, and an officer who you can see in the front center of the unit there. So the numbers are slightly different between the packs, and it's not a big deal for me. I don't really care. But what I've done here is I've got the 30 figures, and rather than using kind of uniform numbers per base, I've just spread them out kind of haphazardly. So there are some bases that have 6 figures on, and then some bases have got like 5, and some, one's even, I think one's got 7 on it. It doesn't really matter. I went for a kind of slightly more haphazard look because these units will be skirmishing. What it means though in the long term is that I'm focusing here on base quantity, not with the chasseur specifically, on base quantity, not on the numbers of figures on the bases, right? Because I want a slightly more skirmish kind of look. So on a per battalion basis, we're probably looking at 5 bases per battalion just to get that spread. But if a game system doesn't particularly care about that, then neither do I, and I'll just scale it back. They just want the guys to look a bit more dispersed. I think it looks better than having them all neatly ranked up, in serried ranks and so on. But yeah, these came out okay. Again, with this 10mm stuff, we're looking at this very closely, and it's not really appropriate if you think about it, right? Your usual visual position is going to be further out. So I show this up close just so that people can get an idea of like how I've painted them. If anyone wants to know the colors, let me know. But yeah, I've focused on getting them done like pretty rapidly. So I did these in probably like a day of just machine gunning my way through, and I would have done maybe more than half. I'd say about 3/4 of these figures were done kind of in a single day. And then finally we get to the French line. These are the again Pendraken 10mm. These are the ones where I based them 3 bases to a battalion, which is the general rule I'm using. And I've nailed down the recipe for these guys a bit better than the chasseur because I've done more of them already. The major difference is if you look at my earlier video, I did them on a different basing scheme. I'm now compressing them down to 30 by 30mm bases. And as I'm watching the video, I can see like hairs stuck to the figures. So they just need a good blowing with some compressed air to just clear that away. But, that's how it goes, right? The minute you sit down to film it, there's always a blemish or something that you notice. Anyway, flags hand-painted. The Pendraken commands packs as standard come with a molded flag, which I'm not usually a fan of, but with the French tricolor being quite straightforward to paint, I just nicer than buying the sort of standard bearers that don't have a molded flag, because that's an additional cost, and I've already got these, so I might as well just stick with what I have. So I did that. The white's looking a bit patchy. I'm not 100% happy with it, but I don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time on figures that, again, we're looking at really closely right now, but when they're on the table, they are going to be far away from you, so you're not going to see all the detail, right? Color wise, I've opted again for that sort of deep recessed black, which I talked about in my last video with the cavalry that I did. So there's a lot of black left on the figure, and the colors are essentially just touching the ridges. So I'm trying to make those reds and those blues pop from a distance, and then again the skin was done with the contrast paint. The flag is a nice sort of centerpiece for the unit, and using the 3 bases per battalion allows that kind of to stay centralized, which brings me joy. So I've done 8 to a base here, so units of 24. There is a kind of part of me that with a 10mm scale would have said, oh, it'd be awesome if the units were just massive, but the trade-off I'm trying to do here, or trying to achieve, I suppose, is between figure counts being reasonable, ground coverage also being reasonable, because there's like, I mean, I could double the base sizes and go to 60 by 60s and just flood them with figures, and they would have the same footprint as a 28mm game. But the problem with the Franco-Prussian War specifically is that the scale of these battles is so enormous that there's a sort of slightly silly look if you're trying to do battalions or something like that, where it again kind of gets a little bit silly. So I'm trying to meet myself halfway here, if that makes sense. But anyway, so that's that. Again, Pendraken are fantastic figures. I like 10mm as a scale. I think it's a good compromise between the 6mm's fine. I like it, but I find at 6mm the humans look quite cartoonish. Like their hands look enormous. Their heads look kind of like bobbleheads, right? I find at 10mm that's where it starts becoming slightly more naturally anatomical, and then it's not quite as detailed as 15mm. So you do have the kind of luxury of being able to cut some corners in terms of not losing your mind trying to pick out small details. And with things like contrast paints for the faces, does a lot of the heavy lifting for me. And I'll just add, I do use a black wash on these to just really cement in those shadows before I do the final touches with the brush. But I don't even know if this camera is any good anymore. This camcorder that I use is at this point probably about 15 to 20 years old. It's high definition, but I suspect at this point that my phone camera will probably do a better job. I just need some mechanism to mount it properly, and that might be a better move going forward. But anyway, so this is now the 2nd battalion of French line that I've done. I think I have another 2 or 3 units ready to go that they're still in their box. So what I'm going to do is, as I mentioned, it's all about, like, as a butterfly gamer, let's call it, it's all about like where the moment takes me, right? So I'm feeling like I'm enjoying painting these uniforms right now. So I've just been getting through them, and the nice thing with the 10mm and the 6mm stuff is that, and even 15 at this point, is I can just get through it really quickly. So the flash to bang on the sort of dopamine hit is quite low, so it's been quite nice. And the Franco-Prussian was one of those things where I've always wanted, I think it looks really great. Like it's big battles. The uniforms are pretty, for want of a better word. And then on the German side, you've got on the Prussian side, well, German side, you've got the variety of uniforms and flags, because obviously you've got, all the different allied states that fight with the Prussians. And then another branching choice that can be made further down the line is to then collect like an Austrian army for the Austro-Prussian War, the 7 weeks war, 6 weeks war, and then do and then have that, and then you can put those Austrians up against French, right? Because again, at the scale, who's going to notice the difference? You can then put them up against each other for your sort of northern Italian adventures, So there's a lot of flexibility in these sort of mid to late 19th century European conflicts that lend themselves to a degree of versatility that might not be something that people are fully aware of. So in my head, I think you can by collecting, let's say, for example, Prussians Austrians and French, you end up with actually multiple matchups, if you will, that can go up against each other. So that adds some value to the project. It's not a sort of one and done conflict where it's relatively monodimensional in that regard. Anyway, not my finest work, but again, the emphasis here was on getting stuff done, because I've stalled out the first bit of the year, and I've just kind of wanted to get some wins under my belt. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will catch you again in the next one. Thanks for watching.